views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, for over 3 years, he's been raising awareness about the 3/5 Clause. His primary goal, getting Congress to change legislation and on the federal government level to add language that directly negates the 3/5 Clause. Stay with us to learn more on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, you can join us here on BronxNet Channel 67. We also invite you to stay connected to us via our social media pages. That is on Facebook, BronxNet Perspectives, Twitter, and then also on Instagram. And if you want to reach me on my professional page, Daren C. Jaime on Facebook, of course, you can get some positive and inspirational messages over there as well. Well, after 2 years of pushing, March 5th of 2017 was observed for the first time in New York City is 3/5 Clause Awareness Day. Now, the significance of this day is one big step in the ultimate goal of true equality. Joining me now to tell us more about this is Councilmember Andy King, who has been instrumental behind the fight, pushing Congress to make some of the changes as it relates to Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution of 1787. And we're also joined by the president of the NAACP branch, and Dr. Jerome is in the house. Last name for
Rice.
I want to make sure I got ready to say right. I said Rice, gosh, forgive me. Jerome Rice is here with us as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much.
So let me ask you this. First of all, thank you both for sharing with us. Black History Month is a very important month. But when we talk about Black history, one of the things that really has been a challenge for us is that of this particular clause.
Yes.
The 3/5 Clause. For somebody who's not familiar with it, first of all, what is the 3/5 Clause for those viewers who may be watching, and how does it really affect us today?
Well, the 3/5 Clause, in a nutshell, in the 1787 Constitutional Convention, the North and South were trying to determine their representation for taxation purposes in Washington, D.C. And when the North looked at the population of the South, they realized that they had more bodies in the South, primarily because of the slave population. And the slave in America looked like who? You and I. So they came to a compromise of saying that black in America at that time would be considered property and would be counted as 3/5 of a human being. That language today still is in the United States Constitution. So 2 to 3 years ago, I went to Congress asking, can we do away with this language? And I was told that we do not remove anything from the Constitution. We amend the Constitution. Besides the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment supersedes it. We don't practice it anymore. I said, fine, so let me take a look at what the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment said. The 13th Amendment said slavery is unlawful in this union unless you're in prison. Well, that tells us today that slavery exists. It's just called incarceration. The 14th Amendment, if you were born in this country, you have all the rights, protection, and privileges. Citizenship, I get that. And the 15th Amendment gave the black man the power and the right to vote, not the black woman. And we know even after the Voting Rights Act 1965, they are still taking our voting rights away from us any possible way they can. Yeah. But it all goes back to the mother doctrine of you asked about the 3/5 Clause compromise, where you said blacks in this country are not equal to their whiter counterparts who run this country, who put the policies together in this country, who find the economic strategies for this country. So how does it have an impact on us today? Well, we can look around at all our communities, whether it's inferior education or inferior foods or inferior housing or just how we get serviced by law enforcement. But there are so many policies, even when they added these amendments, that put us right back into the incarcerating system. So how does it have an effect? With those things I've just labeled, as well as criminal procedure laws that are and policies that are in place that trip up black people each and every day to put them back in the system of incarceration.
Jerome Rice is here with us, president of the NAACP, and sharing with us a little bit about this from a local perspective, right? Let's look at this. How does it really trickle down when you look at 3/5 clause and you look and you see what's happening locally? How do we raise our voice to really speak to this issue that the councilman brings up?
Well, the thing that we need to all be involved in is community engagement. We need to know first and foremost what is actually going on around us. Today, African Americans are still treated as 3/5 versus whole. If you look at some of the senseless policies coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Boulevard, we have a problem. We have a serious problem. Blacks are not being treated in the worlds of criminal justice. We have become more of a target practice than police practice. There are some things that are done with the education system. We talk about the charter schools. Charter schools should be for everyone, not just for those who participate in the lottery system. We talk about voter suppression. Now, voter suppression has gone back as far as 1965. But yet still, we still have people putting barriers in place to prevent African Americans from voting fairly and equally just like anyone else. And so the 3/5 clause is doing more of setting us back, not forward.
And so when we look at where we are today, obviously going to Congress and having that conversation, it had to be a little bit frustrating to hear, okay, we don't change the Constitution, but we amend it. Talk to me about the reaction when you go across, because you got a Congressional Black Caucus, you've got those in the Senate, both black and white, and those who really are in favor of this. What about moving the needle forward? I mean, it's got to be a hard needle with all that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now to really get this needle moved forward.
Well, it's a hard needle, but freedom never came easy for blacks. And anything worth having, is worth the fight. Frederick Douglass says, no struggle, no progress. So we're going to go through a struggle to get whatever freedoms that's due to us. Black folks have built this country. While white folks may run it, we still help build it. And there is definitely a relationship between black and white in America. And the rules were designed because at that time, it was black and white in America. No other demographics of how today might have us with whole different hues and conversations, black, brown, green. No, the Constitution was lying to that slave that looked like people of color who were dark-skinned and were black, who went through the slave trade. So I don't want people ever to get confused or understand the history of America. And yes, well, is it an uphill battle? But we're at the stage right now where we're educating folks to help people understand that this rule, this compromise exists. And even though they choose not to talk about it, their policies were derived from it to oppress a certain people in this country. So, yeah, when I speak to Congress and when I went to them and they told me that they had these amendments in, and I told them, but none of this ever said that the system who said I was unequal from the start is equal, their mouths dropped. They looked at me like, oh, my God. Yeah, well, it's a wake-up call for you as well. So I've spoken to doctors, I've spoken to lawyers, I've spoken to a number of Congress members who did not even know that this compromise was in the United States Constitution. Not mad at them, but everyone needs to do their homework from time to time when it comes to understand how this country was erected. Right. So right now, the legislation has been sent because in the City Council in November 2016, I was able to get the City Council to pass legislation calling on Congress to amend the United States, since they only work by amendments now, to amend the United States Constitution, which will be an uphill battle because the Constitution's only been amended 26 times since its inception. So we're looking for 27 right now. Right. So we want to have an amendment adding language to the Constitution that totally negates it, because once you totally negate it, then you know what, all policies that were put in place, now when we start talking about criminal justice reform, then it has to be money that comes to it, because we've already done away with the virus to say, hey, this wasn't right. Because now that when you put a policy in to put me back in jail, you put the money behind it to put me back in jail. When you have a system that doesn't have enough judges, enough prosecutions, that allows the system to fall apart. In New York, you have a system of Rikers that everyone complains about closing because all of the horror stories that come out. Well, you got to fix your system. The building is not your problem. It's the system, the operational system inside it. But if it's not designed to free people, it's not designed to let people be people, then yeah, you create an atmosphere of oppression and where it's designed to hurt folks. And if you look at the percentage of people in there, it's you and I that's in there.
And I just want to add to Councilman King, thank you, is that, you know, you can't be distracted about the things that's going around us. You can't get caught up on monuments. Dr. King wasn't caught up on monuments. He was caught up on a movement. Okay? And it's very important. And that movement allows you to confront the three evils. And that is racism, that is militarism, and materialism. And if we can confront those three things, then we can really move forward in getting this thing called 3/5 getting removed and get it where we can be as whole versus 3/5. This is unacceptable. This has been too long. And I thank Councilman King for being the first person to bring it to the forefront and wake those same people that look just like me up to know that it's time to not just talk about it, but be about it. You need to move that needle forward. And this is the year to do it right now.
All right, taking a quick break, come back with more with Councilman King. Jerome Rice, our guest in studio. We'll be back in just a few. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
Coming to you from our BronxNet studios, 4 new shows highlighting some of the best of the Bronx has to offer. We sit down with political leaders on In the District and discuss local legislation, events, and issues. See how the community and business come together with The Bronx Now on BronxNet. Nosotros features leaders from a Latino community. Meet those who are moving to make a difference in public service, business, arts, and culture. Looking for new and exciting dining experiences? Then you'll want to savor the Bronx and try new restaurants and eateries that fill the borough with delicious dishes. We have it all, so experience the Bronx in new and fresh ways on BronxNet.
Morning, Gary. We are GetSchooled.com. You want a college education, don't you? Gary, financial aid forms. Biology homework, G. Picking a college, man. You and us go together like tacos and Tuesday.
And I love tacos.
And we are back here on Perspective, continuing our conversation with Councilmember Andy King. The council member had introduced legislation dealing with the three-fifths clause of the Constitution that was passed in the New York City Council. Now the quest is to get Washington to amend the Constitution, and that's been the conversation that we're having. We're in a particular good time of year. The movie Black Panther's out, and a lot of people are talking about not just the money that's been put into the movie and the box office sales, but actually the message behind it.
Right.
Looking at Africa and talking about those of African descent, both on futuristic, but also from a past, and an awareness that's actually that's been created. Do you feel like even in this that you're creating an awareness that is crossing cultural lines? Because I think that a lot of people right now still aren't aware of the three-fifths clause. I think a lot of people walk around thinking that everything is smooth.
Oh yeah, well, like I say, you know, if you don't understand what's going on, you get caught in the matrix of society where you just float around and get along while they feed you PSPs, 2s, and all the stuff kids are playing with, but no one's actually reading the meat and potatoes, the soul of this country. And Black Panther empowers to help young people, especially people of our young brothers and sisters, understand that you come from a line of kings and queens. You know, that our story on this planet didn't start with slavery. You know, but if you leave it up to this country, our story starts. I say, well, no, but before we landed on this soil here, we were kings, we were queens, we were princes. You know, we were the owners of technology, we were owners of the mathematic structures. People still trying to figure out the day. This system trying to figure out how the same pyramids in Egypt or in Mexico. Well, we were great people who did many great things on this planet before we were enslaved in this country. So I'm looking forward. You know, I know myself and Jerome, you know, I know tomorrow in the part of the Bronx Youth Empowerment, our movie day, 12th District Day, you know, we're taking a number of 100 kids to see Black Panther to help them see themselves, you know, in a positive light, other than what they may show you on, excuse me for calling out Viacom or BNT or the Housewives of Atlanta, where it's buffoonery that you look at, this is what our children are being fed. No, we want our kids to see that there's greatness within them, and that's what Black Panther demonstrates.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're taking a group of kids as well, and what's the feeling like for you being able to create this kind of awareness? Because the NAACP has consistently been about that, not just dealing with civil rights issues, but also raising awareness to many of the various issues and causes that really are plaguing the African American community too.
Well, one of the things that we try to tell our children today, that there's something called tell lie vision. And a lot of time in tell lie vision, it put Black people in a negative setup. In other words, when I was growing up, the only roles that you saw were Blacks playing the roles as pimps, drug dealers, gangsters. It was always something negative. However, now there's a movie called Black Panther. And Black Panther shows the children that you can be king, that you are a king and a queen. And then at the end, it also shows how you are also a hero to the world. And so it puts a positive light on what people of color should be. And it also sends a message to the entertainment world, because the first week that it came out, I believe it made over $260-something million. It sent a message that people of color can act and they can perform when there's a cast that's mostly people of color. They can do it, and it sends a positive message to the Black community. I'm going to take a group of kids also up in Co-op City, and we rented out the movie theater. We haven't come up with a date yet, but those children is going to get to see for their own. And we're going to ask them after the movie, what have they learned from seeing, what have they learned from seeing the movie Black Panther? And I hope more movies come out from this same director. Since nobody else wants to open them doors, well, he's kicking opening doors.
And actually, we know that he's in talks right now to do the biography or to do a movie about the greatest, the richest African American king that comes out of Africa. And so that talk is being the richest man in the world is actually out of Africa, and really do a movie about that. So that's that. But going back to where your fight is right now, and your fight really is to raise awareness for that 3/5 clause. Where do you go from here? And how can the public participate in being a partner in this?
Well, the first thing I would ask everyone is on March 5th, which we declared March 5th is 3/5 Clause Awareness Day in the city of New York. And we will be hosting a panel conversation at the National Black Theater located in Harlem, 2301 Fifth Avenue. That's 6 p.m. Doors open at 6 p.m. There'll be a spirited conversation with Dr. Hafeez Muhammad from Mosque No. 7 Nation of Islam, as well as we have a professor from Fordham University. She will be addressing us as well as Brother Courtney from 100 Black Men. And we're excited by the conversation that's going to happen, and 1 or 2 performances to enlighten us also. I would ask everyone who can find a way, find a way. Don't come up with excuses why you can't get them. Put reasons in your head why you should be there, and do all you can to show up on the 5th. And also I would ask people to read up on it, understand what it is, and then start connecting the dots in your environment, in your community. Right now, the best thing you can do is educate yourself, and when you get that call, and I always go back to a phrase from Malcolm X, it says, I'm not anti-white, I'm just pro-black. And there's nothing wrong with it, because people can be anti-Jew, they can be anti-German, they can be pro-Jew, they can be pro-German, they can be pro-Italian, they can be pro-Puerto Rican, but the minute someone wants to be pro-black, you know, it's like you've done something wrong, you said something wrong. So we got to get out of our way, because that's just part of, goes back to the 3/5 clause. You didn't make us equal to you in all of your propaganda, all of your conversation, all your policies, all your messaging, is to say that the person who has more pigmentation in him, you know, more color to him, darker hues, is inferior to you. And that's how our children are taught, you know, that you have to be 3 times greater than your Caucasian. Why? You know, our brains work the same way, and again, between the mathematics and the science and the business and the legacy of us, again, goes back to we were greater before we were enslaved here. And at the point that when we started getting rights and freedoms here, and segregation existed, blacks did a whole lot better under a segregated system than we went when we got integrated, when they started managing our finances and burning down towns like Rosewood, you know, who were doing so well in America.
Let me take a quick break, come back more. Councilmember Andy King, as well as Jerome Rice here in studio, talking about the 3/5 clause, but more importantly, an awareness and breaking an inferiority complex.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
And we're back here continuing our conversation with Councilmember Andy King and Jerome Rice here with us. And we thank you so much for sharing with us today and talking about the 3/5 clause and really moving things forward. But I guess for both of you, you know, you guys have done a great job of really galvanizing communities. So where do you go from here by way of community engagement?
Well, you know, he's the president of NAACP, and I know they'll be continuing to inspire people to get out there and vote. I just ask people, you know, my phrase, I always say that people pay attention to people who participate. I'm asking people in our community to participate in educating themselves. You know, don't get just go by just accepting anything that anyone throws at you. Do some reading, stay up on current events, understand yesterday, because if you understand yesterday, you can work today to preserve your tomorrows. But if you don't have no clue about where it all started for you, you're like a leaf in the wind, just out there floating around. So I just tell people, participate in the neighborhood, participate in history. It's Black History Month, which goes beyond goes far beyond this 1 month, but learn your story so no one else can misguide you about your story.
Mm-hmm.
Black history is what you do today for a better tomorrow. And one of the 5 game changers is education. So it's my role to get out into the community and educate the people on the 3/5 clause. but also go after those schools who are trying to remove Black history out of our schools.
Right.
We have one right here in the Bronx. And for the sake of me, I don't understand it, why you don't, on Black History Month, you're trying to take away history. So it's my job and my role is to educate the people in the community, in the surrounding communities, on the 3/5 clause and where we at today versus yesterday.
And as far as that, we know a school teacher, I should say, principal is now under attack under fire, and for actually removing Black history from Black History Month and not wanting that not going forward. When you look and you hear stuff like that, obviously to many people, it's an indicator that there's still a whole lot more work that needs to be done.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's history, not his story. And so you have to be careful how people tend to want to tell your story in history. Black history is something that everyone needs to know, not just people of color, but everybody needs to know everybody else's history. But when you have a principal, simply because they are in charge, take away Black history from those students, that is something that needs a whole lot of attention, because what comes next? Okay? And so we're going to address those issues, but on the same note, we got to educate the students. This is the importance of knowing your history, because you got others trying to take it away from you.
Right. And so when we talk about the 3/5 clause, it really deals a whole lot more, on a more practical level of the continuing issue of inferiority.
Inferiority.
Or being treated like inferiors.
Yeah,
That's it.
Well, it goes back to racism, prejudice, and I'm not mad at people who are racist, because racism really is just pro your race. Is when you start discriminating, when you have bigotry and hatred in your heart because someone is a different race of you. That's where the problem comes, because there's nothing wrong advocating for yourself and your people, but I'm not going to throw the bus all type of you. Now, if you've been unfair to my people, then now that's another conversation that everyone needs to have, and I'll end with this. I always say, if Congressman John Lewis is still around after 50 years of fighting for civil rights, where is his counterpart bigot that he was fighting when he was 25? They're still here, and those offsprings are still here too. It's how you get educated on American story.
Councilmember Andy King, thank you so much for sharing with us. Jerome Rice, thank you so much for sharing with us. And of course, we want to tell you we're out of time for this particular show. The discussion still continues. Join us here on Perspectives, where we talk about this and a whole lot more. Daren Jaime saying thank you for watching. Be sure to share your perspective with somebody else, because you don't know, it just might make a difference in somebody else's life. So take care.
Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light, because it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life.